Have you ever stood next to someone and suddenly realized you no longer knew who they were? They felt it, but not right away. They had stopped hearing each other even before they entered the forest. It was just that. There, it became impossible to ignore. They came here to talk. They call it working on the relationship. What a strange expression. As if something already broken can be put back together, if you pretend long enough that everything is whole. People come to places like this, when words no longer work. When every conversation ends in silence. Not peaceful, tense, heavy, awkward. The forest understands that kind of silence. They entered together. 5 of them. Friends. Out of habit, not because they feel it anymore. The light was soft, the trees ordinary, and the air clean and familiar. Everything looked right, almost reassuring. But there was already something different between them. She no longer trusted him after that conversation, which he called nothing serious. He remembered how one of them didn't take his side when it mattered. One of them had grown tired of being the one who always made things easy for everyone. And no one wanted to be the first to speak up. They walked side by side, but not together. There was already a distance between them, not in steps, but in glances that didn't linger, and phrases that trailed off before they could be honest. I felt them before I was even there. Tension between people, that's the purest air for me. I don't come all at once. I seep in. Between the trees, between breaths, between the words they never dared to say. It all started with something small. One of them said something, or thought he had said it. His lips moved, his voice formed, but never came through. The others looked at him in confusion. Someone asked him to repeat it. Someone just shrugged. Their mouths opened again and again, but instead of words, only a faint, pink-tinged breath escaped. They were still trying to laugh. It always looks the same, a short laugh that doesn't reach their eyes. I was already close by. Closer than they were to each other. Sound began to fade. Not immediately, not completely, it just stopped being theirs. Footsteps became muffled, the leaves no longer rustled, even their breathing didn't sound like their own. And their voices vanished between them. They drew closer. Almost face to face, eye to eye, at a distance where words were no longer needed. But even there, they couldn't hear a thing. Only pink mist rose slowly between them, as if replacing meaning. Someone touched the other on the shoulder. The reaction was delayed, as if the signal were passing through something thick. I bent the space. Just a little. Enough so they wouldn't notice, but would feel it. The trees began to lean, as if listening. The path remained the same, but the turns no longer matched their memory. Distances stretched out, and the time between steps became uneven. They turned around, each one separately. And at that very moment, they ceased to be a group. I didn't separate them. I just took away the feeling that they were together. Each took one more step, and found themselves in a different place. In the same forest, but alone. The trees lined up into narrow corridors. They didn't force movement, they suggested a direction. The first stopped in front of a memory he had long tried to reduce to a trifle. The words he hadn't spoken back then now sounded louder than any scream. He opened his mouth to fix it, but only pink mist came out. The second one had been moving longer, but his silence was full. Not of sounds, of thoughts he attributed to others, what they thought of him, what they'd already decided, how they judged him. And now those thoughts felt like truth. The third one wasn't moving. Pink moss was already slowly enveloping her legs, softly, warmly, almost soothingly. It wasn't holding her by force, it was convincing her that staying put was easier than moving on. I don't stop you. I offer. The moss rose higher, movement became heavier, as if through thick water. Time began to drag on, repeat itself, loop. One of them ran, but kept returning to that same tree again and again. The forest didn't change. It repeated what was already inside them. Their breathing grew shallow, their hearts heavy, even without sound. And then they began to understand. The corridors narrowed, the trees almost touched, and the light grew faint. And in that silence, they saw each other. At first, silhouettes. Then, details. The faces were almost right. Almost. Their eyes lingered a little longer than necessary. The smiles looked too forced. Something was stirring beneath the surface, not physically, but like a thought that had taken shape. And then it became clear. It wasn't them. It was who they had seemed to each other all this time. Suspicion took on a form. Perceptions took on flesh. Distrust gained eyes. The one who had once been silent, now looked cold and empty. The one who had joked seemed fake, as if hiding something deeper. The one who had promised support looked, as if he were always ready to turn away. They all saw different things. But the feeling was the same. Danger. They tried to say something. To explain. To make amends. Their mouths opened. But nothing came out. Even the pink mist had vanished. Because words no longer had any power. I stepped back. A little. Enough for them to be left alone with it. The forest began to settle, the corridors vanished, the trees returned to their places. The moss slowly receded, reluctantly letting go. The weight faded. And they stood together again. In the same clearing. 5 of them. Unchanged. On the outside. But now they looked different. Sharper. More careful. Colder. No one took a step toward the others. No one reached out a hand. Because each of them knew the others saw, in the same way. The silence remained. But now it was honest. They stood side by side. Close enough to touch. But not close enough to believe in each other. No one spoke. Because everyone had already heard everything they needed to hear. Not in words. And that was enough to never grow closer again. I don't change people. I just remove what's blocking their view. They've always been this way, I just made it visible.